call this public meeting to order. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silent reflection for our servicemen and women throughout the world, and also for those who have passed away in our community. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Rogan?
Here.
Mr. McAndrew?
Present.
Dr. Rothschild? Here. Mr. Donahue?
Here.
Mr. Gahn?
Here. Mrs. Reed, please dispense with the reading of the minutes.
Third order, 3A, check received from Comcast in the amount of $257,172.59 for quarterly franchise fee. 3B, correspondence received from the Federal Emergency Management Agency dated February 5, 2020 regarding the final flood hazard determination for the city of Scranton. 3C, correspondence sent to Mr. John Basiliga, Marketplace at Steamtown, dated February 12, 2020, regarding the Electric City Garage. 3D, tax assessor's report for hearing date to be held February 26, 2020. 3E, minutes of the Historical Architecture Review Board meeting held January 9, 2020.
Thank you. Are there any comments on any of the third order items? If not, received and filed. Do any council members have any announcements at this time?
I'd like to say something. I'd like everybody to know that up in the balcony here we have the Boy Scouts from St. Anne's over in Westside for their communication badge tonight.
Thank you. Anyone else? I have three announcements. First, as you can hopefully see, a new timing device has been installed at the podium. I had mentioned this over the last few months, actually back until last year. It was a goal of mine and I think of council's to increase transparency in terms of public participation at our meetings. So speakers will continue to have 5 minutes to address council. Public participation, as all of you know, is a very important part of our meeting. The green light at the podium will indicate the start of your 5 minutes. Then the yellow light will display and blink continuously when 2 minutes of time remain. At 1 minute of time remaining, the yellow light will then stay fixed, and the red light will indicate that the 5 minute time limit has been reached. This will provide speakers an opportunity to finish their statements and thoughts without the interruption of the bell. And, you know, since I've been on council, one of the things that has kind of irked me is the fact that someone would be in the middle of a thought and then you would get the bell, and it would oftentimes throw people off. If you look at other city councils, other public chambers throughout the state of Pennsylvania and the country, courtrooms throughout the country, they all have timers like that, clocks like that. So I thought that that was important, and I think it's a sign that council is continuing to invest in these chambers, in transparency, in public participation. So once you see the yellow solid light, you will know that you're nearing the 5 minute time limit, and then of course there's a timer there, a timer on the below the council dais where you'll be able to see exactly how much time you have left. One thing I also wanted to remind everyone of is if you ask council a question and you would like an answer right then and there and we can provide you with that answer, that will be part of your 5 minutes. If you would like to continue to speak, of course that's your right, and you would like council to respond in fifth order, please just let us know that so that we can accommodate that request. The other thing I wanted to mention in terms of investing in the chambers is Mrs. Reed has been in contact with the gentleman that is in charge of the sound system in chambers. I know I've mentioned this before, but one of the the issues in these chambers is that when there's a public meeting here and there's people that are presenting, it's oftentimes difficult to hear if you're out in the audience. It's oftentimes difficult to hear council members speak when you're up at the podium. And I think one of the reasons is because the speakers are behind you and not in front where they should be. So that is being looked at and hopefully will be addressed within the next few months. The second announcement I have been communicating with the city's business administrator, Patrick Sheridan, regarding the city wage tax, and as it has been past practice, as the former business administrator paid the wage tax during his employment with the city, Mr. Sheridan will honor that commitment as well. Also, I wanted to make note that next Tuesday, February 25th at 5:45 p.m., Council will meet in an executive session with Stevens and Lee to discuss a matter of litigation. Mrs. Reed?
Fourth order, citizens' participation.
Thank you. The first speaker tonight is Joan Hodowanitz.
Joan Hodowanitz, city resident and taxpayer. This afternoon, I happened to go to a hearing at the Hilton Conference Center with a number of state legislatures, and the topic was local government and taxation. Kyle was there, and Mayor Cognetti gave testimony, as did County Commissioner Dominic. There were one or two representatives from the school board, but their testimony was written. They did not give oral testimony. I was kind of disappointed in the fact that this was not better advertised. We should have seen a lot more public officials and citizens attending. But hopefully anytime that happens, again, we'll be able to advertise it better. It was interesting hearing Mayor Cognetti's comments. She talked briefly about unfunded mandates like stormwater management. So we shall see where that will end up. With regard to the audit, are you going to have that in the newspaper, the summary of revenues and expenditures? Is that coming up?
Yeah, that's required.
Okay. And have you set a time for a public caucus with Rainey and members of administration?
Mrs. Reed, as far as I know, we have not heard from Rainey yet. No, we have not heard from them.
Don't pay them until they answer. That ought to get their attention. I recall I mentioned last week that February 28th is the deadline for the filing of objectives to the tripling of the LST tax. Has anyone considered a Plan B if that is not approved? That'll be a major hole in the budget.
Yeah, I don't know that there would be a Plan B, to be honest with you, because that would really devastate our budget. I'm not sure where else you would get that revenue from, to be honest with you.
Neither am I. Last week also, Marie Schumacher was asking some questions, and some of the, one of the comments she made was that initiatives from last year were getting dropped out of sight, and one of them was, what is the status of the renovations to City Hall? Has that been put on a back burner, or is that being worked, and has any kind of decision been made?
Yeah, so I had Mrs. Reed reach out to our city's grant writer, because it was my understanding that the city had applied for a grant from the state. I believe it was a RACB grant. I don't think we received it the first round. What we're trying to find out is if we were going to reapply for that. So we haven't heard back yet exactly on what the deal with that is, but we will. When we do, I will update the public.
Okay, I hope it doesn't drag on too long. I read in the paper that the county is suing Mr. Basiliga about the leaks in the Electric City garage that affected the government center, which brings to mind the issue, have we committed him to a caucus for updates to the repairs to that garage? And if so, are you going to invite the commissioners?
We did not schedule a caucus. We sent a letter to Mr. Basiliga asking him for several pieces of information within a 30-day period.
Okay. And this morning I attended the opening of the bids for Ethics Board Solicitor. They did receive 3 bids, and the law department's working on that. But my question to you is, you should have received in writing from the business administrator the adjustments to the political contribution limits. Have you received that yet?
We have not received that yet. When we do, I will make that a part of the third order.
Okay, but don't let that drag out too long because it's overdue. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Patricia Nestor.
Patricia Nestor, taxpayer. Thank you for looking into the grants for the pool on Penridge. I watched the meeting last week on YouTube, so I know you're doing a good job because that needs attention and
Yes,
nobody's
we're working.
done
We
it.
are working on it. I have some meetings set up. Very excited to find a solution for that.
And I saw you're looking in to find a way to have college students stay in Scranton after graduation. And one of my tenants just graduated from Marywood, and he was looking for a job in his profession that he went to school for, and he couldn't find one, so he just took a regular full-time job. If he found a job out of the area, I would have lost him as a tenant, but he couldn't find anything in his field. But the problem with the students is cost of living. The rent is high in Scranton. And I know for students, they're not renting apartments, they're renting rooms in a house. And I know someone who's a landlord, and when I was looking to rent a 3-bedroom, he's like, get 3 students, you could charge them $800 apiece. And they pay out of their student loans. They don't care. You know, they're not thinking of the future where they're going to spend 15 years paying back that money with interest. So when they graduate, they need to find affordable housing. They're not getting loan money anymore, plus they have the loans coming in. And if they don't get the great job and just get a regular job, they can't afford what they were paying in college. So the rent, is what's going to keep people, because my tenant, I inherited my house, and my mom was a nice old lady and only charged him $400 a month, including utilities. So that's what he's being charged, because he has loans and he can't afford anymore. So I mean, I'm not making any money off him. This is my act of charity, you know. So that's something. And I saw on Facebook today that the mayor is looking for submission ideas for a new flag for Scranton. I just say we don't need a new flag. I like the old one. I didn't authorize it. All right, that's it. Have a good night.
All right, thank you very much. Have a nice night. The next speaker is Ron Ellman.
Hello, Council. I guess we should thank the Lord that we have 2 such distinguished commissioners like we're blessed with at this time that are so concerned about the dilemma 24 years in the future that they want us to suffer and the pain of it now. You know, it's something to stand right here and know some of these people out there watching this are on the verge of losing the most cherished thing in the world, their homes. I don't know, but I imagine some of you have encountered them over a period of time like I do at the store all the time. It's a great sadness, what's happening in this city. 11% tax increase that's unnecessary at this time. I know when this happened that the schools is just almost in a total, utter collapse of our school system. And it's not being addressed properly. Miss Finnan was sent up here to do something about it, and she just caved in. She joined them. I guess she can't lick them, join them. I had a lady last week when I was at Price Right. She was complaining about school lunches. She told me they're very, very expensive. She said, I get a voucher. I said, well, if you get a voucher, what are you complaining about? It's the amount of money, she said, that the school lunches are. I said, you get food stamps, because I see your green card, and you get vouchers. People like me are paying for part of this somehow. I said, what are you complaining about? I said, why don't you take your food stamps to the school board and tell them you want to pay for your kids' lunch with them? You know, she had a fit. She said, you're taking food out of my children's mouth that way. I said, well, you're taking money out of my pocket your way, you know. There's no winning with some people. You know, Jessica, nobody has addressed these phony nonprofits since Miss Evans attempted. Maybe they need another lady to try to get something done about all these phonies. You know, don't go to Lackawanna College because they told her to go to hell. They weren't given a dime. There's a couple hundred properties have taken future-wise millions off our tax rolls forever. Not a thing's being done about it. Real quick, when I was walking my dog last week at NAIOG, a man told me, I don't know exactly what I'm getting at, but he said there is a plan for the city's electric bills for the schools and so forth. And he said, the lights at NAIOG are on that plan for the parking lot. And I don't think that's right. The park's supposed to be closed at night. Why should we pay for the lights, even if it's on this school plan he tried to get over with me? And one other thing about in all these years that I've talked to people, I've had a dozen I know complain about Geisinger's insurance is so poor. They said they send you places that they can't get to. I thought maybe something could be done about that. I like your clock. It's a good idea. Yeah, whose was it?
We've been talking about it for a year, so it was...
Lee Morgan told me it was his idea.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
I wish I'd thought of it.
You can
Well,
take credit for it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Lee Morgan.
Good evening, Council. Lee Morgan. The first thing I have here is there is some discussion going on about the flag for the city, and really we don't need to solve that problem. We really need to solve a problem of overtaxation in the city and cutting the budget. Now, somebody came here last week and asked, how do you cut the budget by 30%? Well, that's a very simple thing to do. You take it, you open it, you look at it, you see where every line item, every penny in that line item is spent, and you make cuts. The city's problem is it's overtaxed its people for so long that it thinks it has a right to just keep taking forever. And that, like the city said, there's no limit to all the money we can take because we're a home rule community. That's how arrogant our government is. It really is. And that's why we threw the British out of this country, because they thought they could tax us the same way. But this city government is just totally beyond belief, because it takes grant money and wastes it, like the city pools for one. But you know, the most amazing thing is that the city collects a franchise fee. They raise $250,000, but the question from that should be, why isn't that money used to fund the city's access channels? you know, maybe in fifth order you could answer that question. And when we talk about stormwater and paying for it, it was funded. It was part of the Scranton Sewer Authority. There was a part of that money was collected to maintain the storm basins and to take care of that problem. So maybe you can answer that question in fifth order. And while we're at that, right, maybe you could tell the city residents where the 500 parking spaces are they paid for under the previous administration in fifth order. Because, you know, in my opinion, a lot of money was stolen in this city through the government. The renovations of a couple buildings down on Lackawanna Avenue, $25 million gone. Where? Okay, and you have to ask yourself, well, why would the state government do that? Well, because everybody's in on the take. And the only people that aren't in on the take are the people in the neighborhoods. Because the political parties themselves, the Democrats and Republicans, they're inherently corrupt. They're only interested in taking care of the party. And that's the problem here, because we've forgotten how to take care of the residents. When somebody gets up and they talk about the school district, the children in the school district are receiving meals, and you know, that's a good thing. But somebody's got to ask, why are these people living in poverty? Why? And why does the city itself look like it does? Why are we putting apartments in buildings in the downtown? Because there's no real use for them? So we're taking all the people we can out of the neighborhoods, and we're not investing any money in the neighborhoods. Where are the curbs and the sidewalks? Where's the investment in the neighborhoods? You know, you got children in this community that grow up and die of heroin overdoses, but they had no playground programs, and the little bit they had came through a nonprofit because they're used as tools to win elections. And when you take a look at the Scranton School District, let's be honest with ourselves. We elect people. We have some people on this council, and we have somebody in the mayor's office. They could have solved those problems over there. No, they didn't do that. They ran out of there. And too many people have run out of there. Now, I put my name in for one of those seats because I was going to show them what you do with a law book and an ink pen. And I'm a truck driver. The sad part is we've elected people that have no ability to lead, and it's not going to change until the people get tired of it. We're selling senior citizens' homes for pennies, and we're telling people come here. But when you look at what the Chamber of Commerce is doing, everybody can come here and live for 10 years for free. I mean, come on here, invest a little bit of money and don't pay anything. Why we bleed the residents completely dry, and everybody puts their suits on. And you know the other thing, I think the mayor should come here and speak at the end of the meeting. Not come into the meeting, say a couple things, and leave. Because you know what we need in this community? Answers and tax cuts. And we don't need the city government funding a court battle to continue to tax us over the top of the tax caps because you think that you are entitled to tax us as much as you want. That is not the way it should be. The Constitution isn't something we should live by. It's something our government should live by. And when people learn that and stand up for themselves, this country will change.
There's no one else listed on the sign-in sheet. Would anyone else from the public like to speak?
Good evening, Norma Jeffries, city resident. And I won't say that I wasn't planning on talking tonight, but I wasn't. But I did get a response to some of my questions from last week, so I just felt that not only myself, but other city residents should also know that when they park downtown, like Mr. Donahue has said, that time travels with you with the per license plate. So as you move from parking meter to parking meter, as long as you're under your 2 hours, it seems that you're not going to get a ticket. So I just hope that that's not the case, because if I get a ticket, I will put it on one of your desks, with the ticket. So I do appreciate those responses. The other questions that I had, and I have to digest the information that I got back before I speak about it, but it was about the K&S company and the agreement, and thank you for that information, whoever gave that to me. But I do have to digest that because, just in scanning it, it just raises more questions for me. So I will be speaking about that at a later date. But as far as the parking meters are concerned, I did have a chance to, this wonderful color document that was passed out by the parking meter. I always get their initials mixed up, the MDS or whatever their company name is. And it's a very colorful document, but I didn't know if anyone really digested it. And I don't know if we could digest it, because once I start reading something and there's an error, it loses credibility with me. So on this page, well, there's no page numbers for one thing, and I think that's just very inefficient for someone to put out a document with no page numbers. So the thing on here, on the page that's new on-street kiosk system, this particular page, there's 2 errors that I think are on this page. So I don't know if any of you guys, anyone, I'm sorry, Jessica, for saying guys, but if any of you up there read this and if you saw the same errors that I saw, I don't know. But to me, you start to lose credibility, because right away I think then if there's, those words are wrong, I can pick up the words, but I can't pick up the numbers. So if they're putting numbers in there, we have no idea if the numbers that they're quoting in their presentation are really valid. So, you know, I looked at it and I thought, I did a lot of presentations in my career, and my boss would have had a fit for number 1 if I put a presentation out with no page numbers. And then number 2, if I didn't put the correct information out. You know, I wouldn't last too long in my career to have retired from my career of presentation. So I say that because I just think you need to look at those numbers. I don't know if the numbers are right or not, but I hope you saw the same errors that I saw.
Yeah, Mrs. Jeffries, I believe they were just grammatical errors, but I'm going to have Mrs. Reed forward them to Dave Trevisani from NDC and ask him to address those and double-check the snapshot of the budget that was put in to make sure those numbers are correct.
And any way that we can confirm that the numbers that they're using in their presentation are correct, that any of those numbers weren't transposed?
Yeah, I will ask him to confirm that those are in fact the correct numbers.
Yeah. Okay, because they will be back, I think, if I made a note in my folder here, they'll be back for another presentation at quarterly. They're supposed to present to us.
Quarterly. We don't have a defined date yet, do we, Mrs. Reed? They usually contact us to let us know, but yeah, they will be back quarterly.
Okay. Well, so that was the main thing. I just wanted to let everyone know that you can travel about the city, and as long as you're within your time frame of, and it follows your license plate, not the other. Okay? Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to address council?
Good evening. Dave Dobson, resident, taxpayer. On those speakers, if you've ever been out to a rock and roll concert or anything, the band is always behind the speakers and the speakers are pointed at the audience. So obviously you're having problems with microphones and feedback and all of that stuff. Maybe the columns, mount them on the columns or something. Once again, our 30% cut. We have minimum manning for police and fire. I never wanted a job myself that I always had to be on the job. You know, if you're a fireman and you're sitting around and maybe watching a race or a car race or a football game or something on a Sunday, and a big fire gets started, guess what? If you had 3 or 4 beers, you're probably drunk on the job then, you know, you're showing up for work intoxicated. So a lot of those people, public responders, first responders, they're owned by their jobs. And, you know, furthermore, we have 36% tax exempt, and many justifiably so. But the point being that the state does not compensate for that, and I keep emphasizing that. There was a recent article in the Times this week, $20 million less for the same demographics as another city school system. So I would contend that a lot of our problems aren't that lots of money is being wasted. Yes, we've had some problems, but everybody has problems. And we lost in court with public employees, you know, with minimum manning. How do you cut 30% out of the budget when every last dime is spent and a large portion of it on wages and so forth? And once again now, I had a question last week, and I think I verified it with the Electric City in the former Mellon building. And they were also turned down by the city zoning for their project with the Electric City, because the apartments are basically like a bedroom. You know, you'd be lucky if you could have a hot plate in there and a bed, fit a bed inside with the size, with a small refrigerator or something. So we don't need any more, so it's time to head that off at the pass. What's done is done. They may get their tax exemption for those buildings, but it's time to repeal the type of legislation that went through here in the last year, where somebody can buy up a building and put a couple of bucks into it and have a free ride. We just can't afford it. And a lot of people are right. These old grannies and gramps and stuff, they don't have the money to shell out to compensate for reduced taxes for some big landlord agency or land holding agency. And once again, on the Public Works, Department of Public Works, I would love to see what it costs to have a crew show up at everybody's front door, keeping in mind that that could all be divided equally. But how much money does it cost before any trash is removed, to just have, keeping in mind that they have to come every week to see if you have trash to be removed, whether it's 1 bag or 4 bags, and at least see if this, what it costs, because I think a lot of people would, it would change their attitude if they realize that most of the money, if not all, from that $300 or $270, whatever it is actually what it costs to show up at their door. And it must be very expensive for trucks and maintenance and insurance and la-di-da. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Have a nice night. Would anyone else like to address council?
Tom Coyne, members of council. First of all, thank you for getting back to me on the tipping fees. I appreciate that. I'm glad that it came back in a really timely manner. I do appreciate when I get a response quickly to a question. I think that is a wonderful thing. Not from your wheelhouse, but I wanted to put forward that in traveling to a photo shoot this weekend, as a matter of fact, went across the Philadelphia area. And right now in the Philadelphia area, it's either 8 or 11 separate schools are trying to put in an emergency declaration with the state of Pennsylvania. The reason why is because of lead and asbestos contamination. The teachers have been protesting it, some of the schools have been closed down there, but what they have put forward is they're trying to get together and push forward to the state of Pennsylvania to put an emergency declaration in. Because if an emergency declaration is put in and accepted by the state, that allows the school district themselves to tap into the state's rainy day fund and take care of all of the situations immediately. So if the city of Philadelphia has these, it's either 8 or 11 schools with the same situation up here of asbestos and lead, someone should be communicating. Of course, school board, I have to wait till the beginning of next month to talk to them, but someone should get the ball rolling to go, we're in the same situation too, and if you can get that rainy day fund opened up so we can get immediate funding from the state under an emergency resolution, It is silly to wait on it and spin and try and figure out how to get funding and how to take care of it, when if you can get together as a group of teachers, Philadelphia's issue may help to solve our issue as well. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to address council?
Marie Schumacher. I've been looking at our numbers, and I don't like what I see, especially for the future. So I would like to know, what is our plan if the 511 appeal is not successful?
Well, I don't, to be honest with you, and this is just my opinion, I don't know that there is another plan at this point, because if you lose the Act 511 case, I just don't know how you make up that revenue. I don't know where else the revenue comes from. It's such a large portion of our budget.
I understand that.
So I guess
But we haven't been providing for it in the event either, so, but that's the history. But now we have an opportunity when they go to court to see if that we get a triple LST tax.
Well, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. If the city loses the Act 511 case, the money's got to come from someplace. That's the honest answer.
It's going to be back to the, yeah, we know where it comes from.
Right.
Trust me.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what we're doing about looking through. For instance, did Mary Dempsey leave a report? Did she get the information she asked for when you had the caucus here on the 4th of December regarding what she thought were outrageous medical costs?
Councilman Donahue can answer that.
I'm actually getting into that now. I'm setting up a meeting with the city solicitor to go through all our health care expenditures, because I have to set up a meeting with the city solicitor.
You personally? You're right?
I am, yes.
And what experience do you have in that?
In what? Health insurance?
In reviewing?
I've been in contact with Mary Dempsey about...
You have?
Yes, and also other insurance brokers in the region.
Have we considered hiring her? And I don't know.
Well, here's just not to interrupt you, but we don't have an HR director yet. They are soliciting for an HR director. That would be the job of the HR director. That would be the job of the legal department for the city. Wouldn't be council's job to go and mine through all types of healthcare information. I think what Councilman Donahue is referring to is that he is trying to go through and get more information on the healthcare costs so that he can update council and the public. And that is something that was left off from former Councilwoman Dempsey, who had raised that question during that caucus.
Well, and we have a lot of other loose ends, as I brought up before. Do we know yet whether we're going to go for a payroll tax, or are we going to stick with the...
No, we haven't gotten a definitive answer from the administration. And right now, I don't think it looks too good, because the school district has made it pretty clear that they're not going to be in favor of it for a number of different reasons. I believe there was an article in the newspaper that Dr. Finan from the school district did not think that it was a good idea. They were concerned about, not having enough money.
So the school district will come up short one quarter.
Well,
so I know Senator Blake is working on trying to find money from the state to. I'll get into that then in 15 minutes.
Okay.
On payroll.
Okay, but there are other things. This building, what month was it last year that this building was in terrible disrepair and nothing has been done to it? Would this building even pass if somebody from the 4th floor came through?
Well, our options are limited. I don't know where else we would go or where else the city government would go. I think when we had this conversation months and months ago, the thought process then was for the city to apply for a RACB grant through the state, which I don't believe we received the funding the first round. I mentioned before you came tonight that Mrs. Reed is in contact with our grant writer and some other officials in City Hall to get an update on whether or not the city's applying for the second round of the RACB grant money. Obviously, we would not have the ability or the funds to do a full rehab with just city dollars. We would need help from the state.
What about stormwater? When are we going to get back to making a decision on stormwater?
Well, we wouldn't be able to make a decision until we get a report from the company that was hired by the city, I think, a year or two ago. We're waiting for Mr. King, the city planner, who was going to have a conversation with the mayor, and then was going to agree to come to a caucus and give us a full update.
And when do we expect that?
I don't know. We haven't heard from Mr. King yet.
Could you follow up and maybe get an ECD? But speaking of that, Mr. King is really wearing 3 hats at the present time. When are we going to advertise, or the city going to advertise for the vacancies that are around, like the zoning officer?
I don't know. That would be a function of the administration. I don't know.
We don't care to ask the administration?
Well,
when
it's
they're
not
going
that,
to do that?
no, it's not that we don't care to ask. It's that I'm assuming that they just put out for the HR director. They put out, I believe, for the fire chief. I'm assuming, I don't know if it went out yet, to be honest with you. We can find that out. But
No.
I'm assuming if there's an
No.
open position, they'll advertise for it.
Okay, my
Thank
time
you.
is up. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice night. Would anyone else like to address council?
Fifth order, 5A motions.
Councilman Rogan, any comments or motions?
Just one brief comment. I wasn't planning on bringing this up today, but it was brought up a couple times from the podium, and I actually had a few people text me about it as well. The idea of redoing the city flag, which I do agree the city flag probably isn't the most appealing that could be out there. But frankly, I think it's a waste of time and a waste of money to be dealing with that at this point in time, especially that there's so many city vehicles that have the city logo on there, and the cost of changing them out would be, again, it wouldn't be a huge number, but it's money down the drain. There's bigger things the city needs to be worrying about. A litany of them were mentioned at the meeting tonight, but one that's really concerning me is we're sitting here, we're in the middle of February, and we still haven't gotten a proposal from the administration on what their plan is for the garbage fee. We've heard that they're not going to pursue the idea that former Mayor Evans wanted to pursue for the $250, but we still don't have legislation on the books for a garbage fee. Hasn't been introduced, and those bills have to go out shortly. So if everyone agrees, I would like to send a letter to the administration asking for a status update on where those bills stand and what the plan is. People are asking if the discount's going to continue. Obviously, I hope it does. Personally, I was partial to the $250 in the taxes system that Mayor Evans proposed. Obviously, that's not going to happen this year. We're in the middle of February. It's just too late. But I would like to see that implemented in future years. I think it's a more fair way to do the process, and it would give everyone a break. But again, we're sitting here in the middle of February. There's still no resolution on this. The city logo issue, to me, is a waste of time to discuss it. So that's my comments on that, and that is all for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman McAndrew, any motions or comments?
Yes, I would just like to congratulate a couple people tonight. So I would first like to congratulate West Scranton's boys basketball coach, Jackie Lyons, on his 500th win. Coach Lyons has been a devoted coach, mentor for our kids on and off the court. Secondly, I would like to congratulate West Intermediate boys 8th grade basketball team for their division championship. That's all I have.
Thank you. Dr. Rothschild, any motions or comments?
No, nothing at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Donahue, any motions or comments?
Just to respond to Ms. Schumacher's question about payroll prep, I know that Senator Blake is looking at finding money to sort of bridge the gap, because there would be a quarter gap, especially in the school district, and we're also looking into ways to bridge our gap that we would have, that the city would have. And we're also looking at, if we pass it in, if we could pass it in July, could we make it effective January 1st? Because I know that's one of the issues with the school district, is that you'd sort of be collecting, if you were to make it effective July 1st, you'd be collecting 2 taxes in 1 year. So I know we're looking at those issues and we're working through them. I go to our Pell meetings every day or every week, and that's one thing that's brought up. And we also recommunicated with our shared services, and that's also something we've brought up there too. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Just a few items. First, I mentioned this at the top of the meeting. I'd just like to mention it again. I did have a conversation and received an email from Pat Sheridan, who is the business administrator, and he stated that in response to our conversation, if the tradition has been that the business manager pays the city wage tax, even though it is not owed, I will honor that commitment. Second, I want to provide an update that council received from the Moretti Law Firm, who's doing the gas card audit. I'd like to read into the record the email received Thursday, February 13th from Arthur Moretti, the CPA, who's doing the gas card audit. Dear Mrs. Reed, I just want to give you an update on where I am with the gas card audit for all activity from April 2016 through March 2019. After receiving additional information on Fire Chief DeSarno, I had to revise my report with additional relevant findings. On February 7, 2020, I provided the administration with my revised report on Fire Chief DeSarno's self-audit. With regard to the final report, I am still receiving additional information from the city, which will extend my review period and estimated date of final report. I will provide you an anticipated date once I receive the remaining information and meet with the administrative staff for a final review. To reiterate, we are still on budget with the proposed costs that I provided, and our fees will not exceed the estimate. I hope this information addresses your needs. If you have any questions, need any additional information, or would like to discuss in person, please do not hesitate to contact me, Arthur Moretti. Mrs. Reed, the only thing I would ask is that you reach out to Mr. Moretti and let him know that when the report and the audit is finalized, I would appreciate and request that he come into a public caucus and present his findings to council, similar to when we had the audit exit conference with Kohansky and Company. The second thing I wanted to mention in terms of the sign program, as most people are aware, the city engaged with a firm, and I know Mrs. Jeffries had brought it up numerous times, to analyze our sign program, to come up with a method to replace the signs, a database. We did reach out to Mr. Gallagher to give us an update on that, so I'd like to read through that for a moment. The overall assessment of our traffic signs concluded that the reflectivity of the signage was not optimal, with many signs needing replacement, such as stop signs, one-way signs, and the city DPW has been working on these issues. Mr. Gallagher wanted to note that this program is not just a street sign program, but a traffic signage assessment and replacement program. So it's not just the street signs, it's also stop signs and everything else. As I've noted in the past, and he noted to us, it is a two-man crew that is responsible for our sign program. So they're replacing, even making the signs as applicable. It is taking them a little time. They're working methodically throughout the city. A side note that he did want mentioned to council was that the bucket truck needed repair, so he's waiting for temperatures to increase before sending someone up in a bucket truck as needed for street sign replacing. But long and short of it is the program is underway, it is working, and so far I think it's been a success. One of the things I believe that you had asked Mrs. Jeffries was about the grant that the city was supposed to receive. And Mrs. Reed, if we could find out from Maggie Perry from the police department if the city received the multimodal grant that is mentioned in the proposal with K&S Engineering. Just to kind of piggyback on what Councilman Rogan said, I had asked Solicitor Hayes, who has a meeting with Solicitor Eskra each week before the council meetings, to make them aware that, it was my concern that we have not received the legislation for the enacting the garbage fee. Solicitor Hayes, did you get any indication from Solicitor Eskra on when we would be receiving that legislation?
Councilman, the city solicitor reported to me that the resolution or that was passed last year by council had language which indicated that the $300 garbage fee would be for the year 2019 and continue thereafter. And because of that language, they didn't think it was necessary to have additional legislation unless they were amending the schedule and the fee, which they do not intend doing. So my understanding is they are not going to be sending us legislation because the $300 garbage fee is going to continue with the same discount schedule.
Okay, good, thank you.
If I could just jump in, just one follow-up, I guess, since Attorney Esker has been the city solicitor all these years, my question would be, why the past 5, 10 years, as long as I've been on council, have we done it annually when it's had that language in it? So
My understanding is when she reviewed the language of the resolution, she just didn't feel it was necessary because it says we'll continue thereafter unless amended. So because they're not doing an amendment, I don't think that they felt it was necessary, but I don't know why they did it in the past.
Thank you.
Okay.
And the other thing I want to mention too about lowering the garbage fee from 300 to 250, great idea in concept, but the honest answer here is that the previous administration, first of all, didn't present council with any proposal. And from what I understand, it was a half-cocked idea to begin with. Because as I mentioned, sitting here at that table December 4th, in front of Pell, in front of the previous mayor and the previous business administrator, there was a ton of holes in that proposal. One of which was if you rolled the garbage fee into the real estate tax bill, there would be people, for example, who, if they had just a garage on their property on a single parcel, they would be getting a garbage bill for a piece of land in which they did not produce any garbage. There was other concerns that we had that were never addressed in terms of businesses in the city already paying for a private hauler, also now having to pay $250 garbage fee. So in theory, it's great to lower the garbage fee, but the proposal has to be complete, and it has to be presented to council that way. So unfortunately, that will not happen this year. Another thing I wanted to ask Mrs. Reed, if you could find out from the administration if they have any intention of installing GPS across the city vehicle fleet. And where did we exactly leave off with this from the prior administration? When the whole gas card fiasco came to light in the newspaper and came to our attention, I know that city officials met with Verizon back in September of last year, and they were, at that time, seriously discussing equipping every city vehicle or the city vehicle fleet with GPS, which I had brought that idea up because, quite frankly, I think you can avoid a lot of this back and forth if you just do what every other or most other private companies do, equip the vehicles with GPS. Not to track employees necessarily, but you can become much more efficient in terms of gas usage and everything else. So if you could, Mrs. Reed, find out where they left off with that and if that's still a viable alternative. Ms. Schumacher had brought up the civilian parking enforcement. There is a line item in the budget that details where you can find how much money was generated from the civilian parking enforcement. Revenue through the end of September 2019 was $102,225, and that was budgeted last year at $100,000. We also sent Ms. Schumacher the policy that the Scranton Police Department has that Chief Graziano had given to us in regards to reimbursable overtime. As I mentioned, the City Hall rehab project, we had inquired with the administration regarding where we are at in the grant process. Someone else brought up, I think Mr. Morgan brought up, the ECTV and the public access channels. They get their funding through the Comcast franchise fee. We get a check, I think, quarterly from Comcast, and almost all of that money goes to funding our public access channel. And that is all I have.
5B, for introduction of resolution, authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials to execute and enter into a professional services contract with Ufberg and Associates LLP for labor counsel for the city of Scranton.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion that item 5B be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
Second.
Yes, on the question, just want to mention two things. So in reviewing this legislation, I had raised two issues within the past few days with Solicitor Hayes, who had raised it with the administration. The first issue was back in 2018 when the city had re-upped its, or put out an RFP for legal services, and the firm Abrahamson, Conaboy, and Abrahamson had received or was awarded that proposal. I had made an issue out of the fact that there was an attachment E provided in the bid documentation, and that was an attachment called or noted as disclosures by current contractors. And basically what that was at that time was that the contractor or the firm would provide the names and titles of all individuals within in the company or the firm, and any campaign contributions that they gave, not only to city officials but also to any officials in the state. So there was an issue back then with it not being filled out correctly. Eventually it was filled out correctly. This time around, I noticed that the attachment was not included in the bid documentation. So I had asked Solicitor Hayes to raise the issue with the administration, which he did, and the Ufberg Law Firm is going to provide us that information prior to final passage next week, which we will include in third order on our agenda. The second issue that I had raised was former Councilwoman Dempsey is an attorney with the Ufberg Law Firm. In the Home Rule Charter, Section 307, it states no council person shall hold any other compensated city office or employment during the term for which he is elected to council, and no former council person shall hold any compensated appointed city office or employment, nor shall he act as a paid consultant to the city until 1 year after the expiration of the term for which he was elected to council. Solicitor Hayes is researching this issue, correct?
That's
Solicitor
correct.
Hayes? Yeah. So we should have final determination on that next week. Again, just doing our due diligence as council, making sure that that is not an issue. And that's all I have on 5B. Anyone else on the question? All those in favor of introduction signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it and so moved.
5C for introduction of resolution authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials for the city of Scranton to enter into a loan-to-grant agreement and make a loan grant from the city of Scranton's Business and Industry Loan-to-Grant Program, project number as noted, in an amount not to exceed $70,000 to Fancy Parsley LLC to assist an eligible project.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion that item 5C be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? All those in favor of introduction signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it and so moved.
Sixth order, 6A, no business at this time. Seventh order, 7A, for consideration by the Committee on Community Development for Adoption, Resolution Number 17, 2020, authorizing the mayor and other appropriate officials of the city of Scranton to enter into a loan agreement and make a loan from the Economic Development Administration Revolving Loan Program, project number is noted, in an amount not to exceed $30,000 to Ritz Hospitality LLC to assist an eligible project.
What is the recommendation of the chairperson for the Committee on Community Development?
As chairperson for the Committee on Community Development, I recommend final passage of item 7A.
Is there a second?
Second.
On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Rogan?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Dr. Rothschild?
Yes.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Mr. Gahn?
Yes, I hereby declare item 7A legally and lawfully adopted.
7B for consideration by the Committee on Finance for Adoption, Resolution Number 18, 2020, approving in accordance with Section 147F of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 as amended, a plan of financing of the Scranton-Lackawanna Health and Welfare Authority, and declaring that it is desirable for the health, safety, and welfare of the people of the city of Scranton for the Scranton-Lackawanna Health and Welfare Authority to undertake a project for Howard Gardner Multiple Intelligence Charter School.
What is the recommendation of the chairperson for the Committee on Finance?
As chair for the Committee on Finance, I recommend final passage of item 7B.
Second.
On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Rogan?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Dr. Rothschild?
Yes.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Mr. Gahn?
Yes, I hereby declare item 7B legally and lawfully adopted.
7C for consideration by the Committee on Rules for Adoption, Resolution Number 19, 2020, authorizing appointment of Stephanie L. Bressler, Ph.D., 1402 East Gibson Street, Scranton, Pennsylvania, 18510, as a member of the Board of Ethics, effective January 29, 2020. Dr. Bressler will be replacing Joan Hodowanitz, who resigned effective November 25, 2019. Dr. Bressler will fill the unexpired term of Joan Hodowanitz, which is scheduled to expire August 31, 2022.
As chairperson for the Committee on Rules, I recommend final passage of item 7C.
Second.
On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Rogan?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Dr. Rothschild?
Yes.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Mr. Gahn?
Yes, I hereby declare item 7C legally and lawfully adopted. If there's no further business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
This meeting's adjourned. Thank you. Have a nice night.